Hello and welcome along to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host for this week, Matt Addison, and Keifer MacDonald joins me on the show. Before we get started, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, and of course there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link for that is in the podcast episode description box below. Myself and Keifer on this show are going to be talking a little bit about what we've seen from Liverpool so far this season. I know we have done that a couple of times on this show and others as well, but I think there's a couple of interesting elements to add to that. Obviously, it was a big game for Liverpool at the weekend, a doubleheader with Brighton next, but we're going to sort of use the Brighton game midweek and talk through the team that we might expect to see there, with tying in a couple of other bits as well. So I suppose it makes sense to start at the back. We won't touch too much on the goalkeepers. Arne Slot said earlier today he wasn't sure which one of those two was going to start. But across the back four, I think there's some interesting topics to delve into. Let's just look back to the Arsenal game first, Keifer. And obviously Virgil van Dijk, as ever, was excellent. But I thought Ibrahim Konate as well was absolutely superb in that game. What have you made of him so far this season?
Yeah, he's been absolutely amazing, hasn't he? I mean, if you think of where he was earlier this calendar year, you know, especially when if you compare the 2 games at the Emirates in the Premier League, obviously gets sent off in the game in February, doesn't he? 2 yellow cards, and that's kind of Liverpool's downfall after that. They're chasing the game. He makes a couple of silly challenges on Havertz, and then Arsenal obviously seal it 3-1 at the end, and that was obviously kind of the start of his kind of rocky period at the back end of Jurgen Klopp's reign, wasn't he? He struggled, and that kind of coincided with Quansah stealing his place towards the end of the season. And then obviously he didn't have a great Euros. I don't think he played a great deal, a couple of minutes here and there maybe. And then he comes back to Liverpool. Again, he's missed kind of the early weeks of a new manager's reign. And you're thinking this is going to be a really kind of testing season for him, because I think the jury was still out. I think everyone knew that he was a top quality defender. We've seen that. I always think back to that Champions League final performance in Paris and kind of how quiet he kept Vinicius Junior. And obviously for other things that went on that night, I think that's a performance that, goes really under the radar in terms of his Liverpool career. But I think injuries and kind of fitness and availability have always been his biggest issues, and he'd probably be the first to admit that. So when he finds himself on the bench at Ipswich Town on the first day of the season, he's probably looking at what Quansah's done over the last 3 or 4 months and thinking, I've got a battle on my hands here. But he's absolutely risen to the occasion, as every time he's been called upon this season. He's been absolutely imperious, and Sunday was exactly that, wasn't it? As you say, Virgil van Dijk obviously gets the goal, gets the plaudits, but I think Slot in his post-match press conference was quick to point out, Konate's impact, and they are really establishing themselves as like the ideal duo, aren't they? In terms of, Konate's a bit more of the aggressor in the situations. He likes to go out, storm out, win those duels. Where Van Dijk, obviously at this stage of his career, well into his 30s now, he kind of is a bit more with a calm head, if you want to say that, and he kind of sweeps up some of those balls that might get behind. But I mean, between them, they've got it all, haven't they? And a lot of talk about William Saliba and Gabriel Rightly. They've kind of probably been the benchmark in the Premier League over the last 18 months to 2 years. But, you look at Liverpool's defence on Sunday and certainly this season, and you conceded, 5 goals in the Premier League this season. They really are the benchmark now, and proving that, the old saying is, goals win your games, defence wins your titles. And how many times in the Premier League have Liverpool's leaky defence cost them, the business end of the season, But now they've really got a defence to build on, and maybe the attack isn't flourishing as much as people would like. It's been a bit more of a careful approach, hasn't it? But I think that's built on the confidence that people have in the defence, and rightly so, because, as I say, Van Dijk and Konate, Sunday led by Konate, have been absolutely magnificent this season.
I think it was interesting. We spoke to Virgil van Dijk, and he's actually said this a couple of times really in the last few weeks about Konate, about him being a little bit more mature, maybe being a little bit almost taking care of himself a little bit more. Not that he wasn't doing that when he first came to Liverpool, but I think it's been really interesting that he's been able to play 3 games in a week, for example. I'm sure that will probably change this week, and we might see, Quansah and Gomez maybe at the back for the midweek game with Brighton. But I think that, as you say, was probably the biggest thing with him, was that you were never quite sure how consistent he could be, how many games he could play, how you might have to manage him. But I do think it's really interesting that Arne Slot's not really been overly careful with him so far. It's not like he's doing any less defensive work. Trent is still on that side and pushing forwards. He's still having to come across and cover. There was quite a few occasions where he had to kind of gallop across and use that pace that he's got to come and snuff out the danger down that side. He's still doing that kind of 2 positions in one type thing, but he's seemingly able to keep himself fit for longer. Fingers crossed that continues. But I think it's been really interesting the way that the centre-backs have been used. I mean, did you expect to see maybe a little bit more of Quansah and to some extent Gomez as well? Probably Gomez, the fourth choice. But have you been as interested as I have in terms of the way that Arne Slot has used the centre-back so far this season?
Yeah, I think it probably goes across the team as well. I mean, you talk about rotation, and with Liverpool this season, it's probably been a lack of it. I think there was a point made in the press conference earlier that between Bournemouth and West Ham, he made 2 changes to the team, and then between, I think, West Ham and Wolves, it was 1 or something in that effect. Basically, he's hardly made many changes, and Quansah's probably sitting on the sideline kicking his heels, probably still reliving those 45 minutes he had against Ipswich over and over again. But the reality is he's a young defender, and he didn't really put a foot wrong. And I think a lot of people at the time, Ipswich thought it was probably a really harsh decision to hook him at half time. And Slot said after it was just more of to manage the game and how they were playing a bit more direct. They had Liam Delap, who's obviously a big fella, isn't he? He's putting himself about in that first half. But in terms of Konate, yeah, I think I'm not sure exactly what they're doing with him, but I think every game at the minute, especially when he goes from Chelsea to Leipzig to Arsenal, you're thinking, surely one of these, especially with the Champions League, there's so many games now, isn't there? There's 8 games, but spread over between September and January. So you surely think there's enough time there, and Liverpool are going to be comfortable enough with their start that they've made in the Champions League that they've put themselves in a good position that hopefully in these games coming up, even the next two games out at home, I know one's against Real Madrid, but surely they might be able to rotate there. You say tomorrow night's game at Brighton, you'd imagine Konate won't be playing that, and it'll be a chance for Quansah. But I just think the flip side of that is that the momentum that it's building, and Liverpool are quietly building something really nice, aren't they, at the back? I mean, a lot of talk last season about Trent Alexander-Arnold and maybe the levels of his defending, but in the last 2 games, really, Chelsea and Arsenal, we've not really seen a great deal of his attacking kind of output. I know he kind of gets a pre-assist for the goal on Sunday, or the second goal. But in terms of that, you think of his performance against Chelsea at Anfield, he really kind of dug in deep, didn't he, and how Liverpool defend. And I think maybe at times last season he committed himself too far forward, which left Konate with a lot of ground to cover. He was going into midfield and helping out there, which led Konate going all over the shop at times. And it was, I don't think anyone envied the job he was having to do and the miles he was having to cover. And I do wonder if maybe that's, the fact that Liverpool are a bit more. I mean, for starters, they've got 2 defensive midfielders in front of them, which is obviously also going to help. But the fact that Trent's maybe he's on a bit of a leash more this season, I think is fair to say. Maybe that's just kind of lesser in the job that Konate is going to have to do. But certainly so far this season, I think in terms of the Premier League games, you just want to see Konate and Van Dijk because, there's no point chopping and changing because it doesn't really serve anyone. There's going to be enough games in the new year for, and especially at the business end of the season when you get into the spring for Quansah to have a go. And you'd imagine that'll probably start tomorrow night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Trent there. Let's talk about him next. I thought it was interesting what he said and also the reaction to what he said about the Ballon d'Or stuff in the last few days. We'll just quickly touch a little bit on that. What did you make of that, obviously, in the context of the contract situation and all the rest of it?
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because is your glass half full, is your glass half empty situation, isn't it? But just before we go into that, I thought the timing of it was, obviously with the Ballon d'Or coming up, and then obviously what happened last night, the outrage of Vinicius Junior not winning it. I suppose it's a bit of a reality check that goes to show that you're not guaranteed to win the Ballon d'Or if you are going to Real Madrid. I mean, Trent said that less than 7 days ago, and within 7 days, that kind of theory that you need to go to Real Madrid. I mean, I know that was the kind of the talking point of the post-match analysis on Sky Sports with Keane and Carragher maybe suggesting that he would need to go there to win that and achieve that dream. But, Rodri probably the most unglamorous winner of the Ballon d'Or probably since Cannavaro maybe. So for him to kind of pick Vinicius Junior, who's become the spearhead of this new Real Madrid side, he's a Galactico, isn't he? And scored a winner in a Champions League final, twice now. The fact that Rodri was able to beat him to it is a bit of a wake-up call maybe. But in terms of Trent, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think the options were in the context of the interviews, would he want to become a Liverpool captain, which I think was one option, wasn't it? Win the Ballon d'Or. There was a few. Win the World Cup with England was another one.
Win the Champions League again, I think, was one.
Win the Champions League. So I think the way Trent went about it was, well, I've already won the Champions League. I've already captained Liverpool numerous times. So it wouldn't be a new thing. I'm not sure kind of how he disregarded England, but we know he's not kind of had the sweetest relationship during his international career over the last 6 or 7 years. So that wasn't really too much of a surprise. So then it kind of only leaves you with the Ballon d'Or option. And I suppose if if you are doing the maths backwards, if he's won the Ballon d'Or, he's probably won the Premier League and the Champions League, hasn't he? So maybe that's me saying my glass is half full rather than half empty. But I suppose the timing of it isn't great. When he's free to talk to clubs overseas in less than what we're in now. Probably 3 months, 2 months, whatever. I can see why it irked a few Liverpool fans and maybe made them sweat a bit more than they probably have been. But I think, Trent in general, I think it just needs to be sorted one way or another, because Liverpool needs a plan for life after Trent, or they need to plan for life with him kind of thing. I think there just needs to be clarity, because especially when you get into that business end of the season and the fixtures start coming thick and fast, I think if it was it's a similar situation to what Sterling was in, wasn't it, a couple of years ago, and 10 years ago now, and obviously I know Liverpool weren't on that same pedestal as they are now in terms of competing for major honours, but I think at the time, whenever Sterling didn't play well, that was kind of a rod to beat him with, that he didn't care and he was on his way out and he was already eyeing up a move to City or wherever it may be. And you just don't want that to happen to Trent, because if Liverpool do lose a game in March and April and they're in a title race, I don't think it's fair on his teammates, and I don't think it's fair on Arne Slot, to kind of having to field those questions about maybe his commitment and his future and stuff. So I just hope one way or another, and you'd imagine anyway it would be sorted before January the 1st, because Liverpool will need to kind of protect him from being able to speak to those clubs, overseas and to be able to sign a pre-contract agreement. But yeah, I can see why that Ballon d'Or remark maybe irked a few.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, because you can just imagine that is something that Real Madrid say to lots of these top talents, that if you do want to win the Ballon d'Or, you've got to come and play for us. I thought it was interesting that Trent, not completely unprompted, because obviously there were those 4 prompts as we mentioned, but I do think it's interesting that probably is something that if they haven't fed it to him already, if there are conversations and talks at some point, then that's probably one of the first things that they will say.
I suppose the flip side as well, though, is of course he's got a greater chance of winning the Ballon d'Or over in Madrid, partly because I don't think every ounce of his defending will be scrutinised over there, so his mistakes, if he does make any, obviously go under the radar. But then the flip side of that is, if Madrid and are to have a successful season, especially after what's happened in the last 24, 48 hours with Vinicius Jr., Trent isn't going to be the poster boy of that. They're going to push Vinicius Jr. harder than ever now. Also, you've got the fact of Mbappe. I mean, okay, this year, he was never going to win it, was he? Just because he only just joined Madrid, he hasn't had a great start. He was at PSG for most of the year. But you'd imagine between him, Bellingham, and Vinicius Jr., there's going to be a few Ballon d'Ors racked up in the next 5 or 6 years. So I just don't see as well how a right back could even compete with them, and that's without even mentioning Endrick, who's 18 and made a really good start over in Madrid. So I know I completely understand the argument that Carragher and Keane made of you don't win a Ballon d'Or at Liverpool, but I don't see how a right back can win the Ballon d'Or at Real Madrid. That's just kind of my interpretation of it all.
Yeah, I think most people would say that you can't win the Ballon d'Or if you play for Manchester City as well, which has now obviously been completely disproven. So it's one of those things, really. If a team wins the Champions League, and again, you can sort of go around in circles, because maybe he's got a better chance, or probably has got a better chance if he plays for Real Madrid of winning the Champions League. But then you're back to so would Bellingham and all the rest of them. So yeah, you can keep going around in circles with these things, which I'm sure, as these talks continue, that will be the case as well. But let's switch across to the other side of the Liverpool defence. I wanted to have a bit of a chat around Andy Robertson as well. I think that's been a bit of a talking point. I think it's fair to say he's maybe lost a little bit of the speed and the intensity that he's had at some points earlier in his Liverpool career. Obviously, that's natural. He's, I think, 30 years of age now. He's not the same, young, what was he, 23, 24-year-old that came into Liverpool from Hull City. He is a different kind of left-back so far. But are the worries around him sort of knee-jerk reactions, do you think, from the Arsenal game, or is that something that you are a little bit more concerned about long-term?
I think if you were to look at Robertson's last 12 months, probably from the October international break when he picked up that injury for Scotland playing against Spain, and he was out for a lengthy period of time, wasn't he? Missed a couple of months. And I think around that time as well, obviously Joe Gomez came in, deputised really well. We saw Tsimikas briefly before he injured himself. I think maybe that at that point people were thinking about life after Robertson. And to be honest, I was surprised that Liverpool didn't go and recruit a left-back this summer, just gone purely because I think Robertson's getting to that stage of his career. Yes, he is 30, but he's also got a lot of miles on the clock. He's hardly been rotated over the last 7 or 8 years. He's played for such a high-octane manager, high-octane style of play. So the minutes that he's kind of had in his legs, it's kind of no surprise to see that maybe he's kind of paying for that this season. I know there was concerns a few people had concerns about maybe Slot's style of play, because obviously Robertson's a lot more energetic, isn't he? And Slot's maybe not as demanding as that from his fullbacks. He maybe likes him to tuck in, be a bit more kind of cautious in possession. Certainly not flying up and down like Robertson was in his prime at Liverpool. But to be honest, I didn't think he started the season, badly or by any means. He was only kind of against Chelsea last week when he came against Madueke for the first half an hour, maybe the first half, where I thought he struggled. There was one where pretty early doors Madueke got the better of him, and there was one towards the end of the first half where I think Robertson kind of trips over his own feet, and it ends up with Curtis Jones blocking the goal, and that's at 0-0, isn't it? Because Curtis Jones makes the block and then goes down the other end a couple of minutes later and wins a penalty. And it was kind of, in terms of Madueke and Saka, obviously Saka's one of the best wingers in the Premier League and one of the best wingers in Europe, but they are kind of similar profiles in terms of, they like the ball on the touchline, don't they? They shift it out and then they come back in on their left. And to be fair, for the first part of the goal that he conceded on Sunday, I didn't think there was an awful lot wrong with it. To lose in a foot race against Saka, that's not Robertson's fault. The manager will have been aware that probably could have happened during the game, and again, there's no shame in that. But the thing that he just completely kind of lost any credit for me was he does well to recover, and Keller has got the near post covered. You've got Van Dijk coming in, you've got Saka on his weak side, on his weak foot, and he's so close to the touchline. So you're just thinking, just shepherd him out, or just block it out for a corner. But he almost goes like heart over head, doesn't he? In terms of he looks like he just tries to put him in the stands, and he just comes flying in for no reason. Saka obviously gets the nutmeg, and then that completely opens up the angle to fire past Keller. And I know there was a bit of talk after of maybe whether Van Dijk could have done better and maybe whether Kelleher could have done better, but I don't think any of them would have been expecting Robertson to get beat on the byline with such ease. And that was kind of the most alarming thing for me, because that isn't a physical issue. That's obviously, not a tactical issue, but it's a kind of a stylistic issue, isn't it? If Robertson feels at that point he needs to go and clatter someone, let alone in the penalty area, but, so early on in the game when when you've recovered to get him in such a good position. And then after that, I think he was just chasing the game, wasn't he, for large parts of it. There was one, I think it was maybe at 1-0 still, or maybe at 1-1, where a ball comes in and Havertz is at the back post, and Robertson tries to clear it. He doesn't get a touch on it at all, and Havertz obviously thinks Robertson's going to touch, and he touches it out for a goal kick. And at that point, it could have easily been 2-0. And so I don't want to dig Robertson out, because he's a modern day Liverpool great, isn't he? He's been absolutely integral to everything they've done over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Winning the Premier League, winning the Champions League. You think how good he was with Trent Alexander-Arnold, that partnership in their prime. But I think when Kostas Tsimikas came on, which I think it says a great deal about kind of maybe where Liverpool are at in their kind of left back ranks, I think everyone felt a bit calmer. Calm is a word I wouldn't associate with Kostas Tsimikas at the best of times, let alone in a kind of a title clash at the Emirates. But that maybe just shows where Robertson's at in his Liverpool career. So I think Liverpool, it's not a problem area for Liverpool at the minute, but it could quickly become one. If you think in 5-6 weeks' time when they have Real Madrid and Manchester City, you need your players to be on the game, and they're going to be coming up against better players than Saka. Coming up against Vinicius Junior, Kylian Mbappe. So that is your worry at that point, and we know how fine the margins are, at the top, and you need maximum points to win the Premier League. Sometimes draws at home to City and Arsenal prove not to be enough in the end. So if you do have any weak links, I suppose, when the rest of the defence has kind of been so good, and kind of the two midfielders in front of them have been so good as well, it's more alarming, isn't it? Because obviously everyone else kind of feels like they're in tandem, and Robertson's not. But I think I would be surprised if Liverpool aren't looking at that position next summer. You think last summer as well, they were looking at Levi Colwill. There was talk of maybe he could do a bit at left centre half and left back as well. Obviously, they didn't get him. But certainly, it looks like that's an area they are targeting long term. And Robertson will be 31 in the new year. So you maybe think that his time is up. I think he's got 18 months left on his deal, not next summer, the summer after. So that might be a time where kind of both of them shake hands and say, thanks for the memories. And he maybe goes and joins a Celtic or somewhere like that. You could maybe go and see that. But I was quite concerned by his performance on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think definitely it's something that you'd look at in the new year to try and bring somebody in. It probably makes sense to do that, what you say, if a centre-back and a left-back kind of hybrid, so that you can swap in and out and have a kind of gradual overtaking of Robertson in the pecking order, and possibly Virgil van Dijk as well, depending on who that player is and how high their ceiling is. So that's definitely, I think, something that is probably on the to-do list fairly soon for Liverpool. They've got plenty of things to get sorted before that. But I think that is fast becoming another of those priorities to look at. But let's move on from... Sorry, Cole.
Just to go back to that, I mean, Calafiori, obviously I know he didn't play on Sunday, but he was a player again linked with Liverpool, and he's kind of a similar profile to maybe what Liverpool could do with at the moment, do a bit of that left centre-half role that he did at Bologna, and obviously we've seen this season for Arsenal, he's played at left-back, hasn't he? And, he scored a goal against Manchester City, obviously offers a bit of a threat going forward, but maybe you're thinking of times when Trent's going up and maybe into midfield as well, he kind of slots in and makes it a free. So, he's another player who you think, if Liverpool could have maybe got that one over the line, or whether they had any interest, I'm not sure, but he was one that was certainly heavily linked before he went to Arsenal, and you look at how he started his career in English football, you think he could have been a decent addition, couldn't he?
Yeah, I think Josko Gvardiol as well would be a kind of ideal situation. Obviously, goes to Manchester City for a lot of money, and that isn't something I always thought when he was at Leipzig. Maybe the next one of him might be something that Liverpool could have a look at. But who that is, I'm not entirely sure. But let's move on into the midfield, and I think that'll probably take us a lot less time than going through the few issues in the defence. I think it's fair to say that Liverpool have managed things pretty well. I think after what happened in the summer, not getting a midfielder that they wanted, they've found that balance again. Balance being the key word really in the centre of the pitch. But I suppose the key battle, if you want to call it that, is Curtis Jones and Dominic Szoboszlai. As it stands, have you got a preference one way or the other? Were you surprised at all that it wasn't Szoboszlai against Arsenal at the weekend?
I actually was, to be fair, and I think I've not been overly impressed with Szoboszlai off the ball. I know I've said it to you a few times after games and stuff. I kind of want a bit more from him, just in terms of what we saw this time last year from him, how good he was in his first couple of months at Liverpool, and certainly what we saw, or clips of, what we saw from his time at Leipzig as well, and Salzburg, how kind of efficient he was in the final third. His numbers were brilliant. His set-piece delivery, his dead balls are brilliant, and we just haven't seen that yet at Liverpool. But I think you referenced it before one of the Champions League games recently, that he's kind of maybe doing a dirtier role for the team in terms of that off the ball running and kind of providing cover for McAllister and Gravenberch, and even at times finds himself in some of the fullback areas at Crystal Palace. He was good at that when he came on. So it's difficult, isn't it? I thought Sunday's game in midfield, you knew what Arsenal were going to bring. They were going to bring a physical presence, weren't they? So you're looking at Declan Rice and Merino. You know what you're going to get from them. Partey coming into that as well. Timber again inverting. So it was always going to be a bit of I think whoever got the better in midfield was going to have more joy on the day, and I think that kind of played out in the first half, because I don't think Liverpool got close to him. I'm not sure what was wrong with McAllister, but he just kind of felt offbeat, and I'm not sure if it was just one of those days or whether he was carrying a knock or anything, or maybe the effects of a recent international break, whatever. He hasn't had a great deal of rhythm since he came back. Obviously, he only came on against Chelsea late. I know he started against Leipzig and whatnot, but in terms of the rhythm he had earlier in the season, maybe that's been halted a bit. But I thought when Szoboszlai came on and Jones obviously went back alongside Gravenberch, I thought the balance of midfield was brilliant, and it really allowed Liverpool to kind of play through the lines and actually get the ball down, because before that they were just kind of hoofing it long and looking to pick on scraps. And when you've got Nunez up there on his own and he's kind of just doing doggy runs for the sake of it, you've got no luck. But after that, you could see, I'm not sure if it was Szoboszlai's pressure on Arsenal or what it was, or Liverpool just kind of grew in confidence. But certainly with Jones and what he brings, because I thought in the first half, again, he playing higher up the pitch, he didn't really offer Liverpool a great deal. I think Jones is always at his best when he turns and he can play the ball forward. We saw him in those tight areas when he was a lot younger, but I think he's kind of been industrialised by Jurgen Klopp, if you know what I mean. You think of when he came into the first team, he was Wijnaldum's replacement. He kind of gets the ball and gives it now, doesn't he? You don't really see that he's not a player you would associate with the number 10 as how you maybe would have 4 or 5 years ago. But when he was in that deeper role alongside Gravenberch, it kind of worked really nicely. And so all of a sudden now you're looking at that and thinking, well, McAllister's obviously been brilliant for the first 8-9 games of the season. He's obviously not started the last 2 league games. Is that your trio now that you go to away from home, or do you just give McAllister the benefit of the doubt next time? So these are all the decisions Slot will have to contend with. Interestingly enough, that was the midfield initially that he picked. Well, that Klopp picked, for the game last season, wasn't it? It was McAllister, Gravenberch and Szoboszlai. McAllister, Gravenberch and Jones was the game in February. Obviously, that was more through choice. More through kind of injuries and suspensions and whatnot, rather than choice. And this time around, obviously, Slot favoured that. But for whatever reason, McAllister just couldn't really get going. And I felt once Szoboszlai came on, I mean, the triple change in general, I was quite impressed with. And I thought that just kind of reinvigorated Liverpool. I'm not sure if it had something to do with, Arsenal and the injuries they maybe suffered, and maybe there was a bit of belief that grew from that. But I thought that really did change the game. And I'm glad for Jones as well, because there was a lot of talk, obviously, when he didn't start on Wednesday against Leipzig of, he's played really well, and all of a sudden he finds himself back on the bench. But Slot basically said it would have made no sense to play him in Leipzig. He'd hardly played a great deal already this season. So, to kind of give him those extra days of recovery and let him go again at Arsenal. And I think he kind of justified his selection, certainly in the latter half an hour or so.
Yeah, I think the midfield selection for tomorrow's game with Brighton as well, I think that'll be interesting. I think Wataru Endo basically is a nailed-on starter, but then the other two, I think you can maybe make an argument for a few players there, maybe even a Tyler Morton to get thrown in, because it's...
I think I'll throw McAllister in there as well. I think he just needs to...
Yeah, maybe a McAllister and Curtis Jones maybe, or maybe the fact that Szoboszlai didn't start at the weekend says that he might bring him back in. I think there's maybe a few different ways you could go there. But I
suppose a lot of them, they don't have the the personnel to give them more than a night off, so they're going to be travelling anyway, aren't they? So you might as well just give them half an hour, 45 minutes, whatnot, whether that's the last half an hour or the first 45, and just kind of keep them ticking over that way. You'd hope that Liverpool would have enough to kind of maybe see the game into a healthy position, and maybe then on 60 you can bring a Trey Ione on or someone like that. But I certainly wouldn't, if you go Endo, Morton and Jones, that's a very inexperienced midfield. That's one that's never played together. But I think if you do Endo, McAllister, which two players who were really impressive at Liverpool at the back end of last season, and then you maybe throw a Jones in or a Morton in there as well. I think that maybe has a bit more kind of industrialness to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it probably helps as well that it's Brighton at the weekend as well, so it's not like you've got to think like last week Arsenal had an extra day to prepare or anything like that.
In the same boat, aren't they? So
it's exactly the same for both teams. So absolutely. Just quickly before we finish, the usual question about Darwin Nunez, who continues to be a little bit of a conundrum. Didn't have a shot, which is unusual for him against Arsenal, but did manage to create the assist for the Mohamed Salah goal. And I think Arne Slot mentioned in his press conference he was impressed by the sort of running that he got through, the workload that he'd managed to get through after 3 big games in a week. We now know that Diogo Jota isn't going to be back until after the November international, so there's a good few games coming up where Nunez could put together a run. Have you been impressed by him? Have you been sort of confused by him in the last few games? Where do you stand at the moment with Darwin Nunez?
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I always find him really difficult to assess at the best of times. Not really. I mean, we're 2 years into his Liverpool career now, nearly 2.5 years, and I still don't know how to. I don't know if it's a glass half full, glass half empty situation. You really don't know, do you? It kind of swings week to week, and I think this week has probably been the most difficult week to kind of analyse of Darwin Nunez' Liverpool career, purely because he's obviously he's hardly had any shots. I mean, the game against Chelsea and the game against Arsenal. No shots combined in those 2 games, which as a striker on the face of it, you think, hang on, if you didn't watch the game and you just purely saw that on your phone, you'd be like, hang on, what's he doing here kind of thing. But I think in the context of both games, you can kind of see why maybe Slot is, obviously he's not favouring him because he doesn't have any other options, but why Slot is now persisting with him and kind of singing his praises, because again, as I said earlier at the top of the show, goals win your games, defence wins your titles, and that just doesn't come from, your back four and your 2 midfielders. That comes from everyone. I mean, you think of where Liverpool were at, a few years ago when they had Roberto Firmino, the best, defensive forward in Europe, and how successful he was. And at times maybe got critiqued because he didn't score enough goals. And obviously that's kind of been a case of Darwin Nunez' Liverpool career. He hasn't scored enough goals for the money they paid for him. But this week, I think, especially when you think of where he was at the end of his first season, I mean, I remember Klopp said to him at one point, or he said in the press conference, that pressing was a ticket into his team. He kind of didn't start 6 or 7 games maybe as Liverpool kind of chased Champions League, and Klopp was basically saying he's really good at going forward. He's good at all these runs, but if he's not doing it the other way, we're a man light when it comes to counter pressing and whatnot. But he came on against Chelsea last week, did really well. Again, it wasn't the typical Nunez kind of shot heavy performance that we've been used to, missing chances, spooning chances, maybe scoring a chance. But his link-up play was there. He was, at times he was, playing fullback. He was tracking back that much. Then in Leipzig, he gets the goal, which is kind of really good for his confidence because that buys him a bit of time then going into the Arsenal game. I think if he'd played 3 games this week and not scored, regardless of how well he had played, there will be questions. But he's obviously got that goal. It's a poacher's goal, and that takes him over the line. that gives him a bit of breathing room. And you can see he was kind of invigorated by that at the Emirates on Sunday. I think he was quiet for a lot of it. Again, I don't think the stats make for great reading. But if you actually watch the game, he was always on the shoulder. He was always kind of chasing down stuff. Liverpool pressed in a kind of a weird formation. At times it was all four of them going. At times it was just Nunez. But he was just the kind of the constant, wasn't he? And he kind of gets that payoff at the end. Him and Salah combining once again. And I saw a stat that I think Andrew Beasley posted that I think it's only Mane and Firmino who have assisted more Premier League goals now for Salah over the last 7 years. And I think that was right in saying Nunez's 15th assist for Salah. I don't know if it was in the Premier League or just as a total, but obviously shows that they've got a really good understanding. Maybe Salah lacks that pace now, but Nunez obviously has that over a longer distance. And it was a great ball over the top from Trent. I mean, Nunez did his best, didn't he, to kind of kick the ball into the ground and nearly trip over. But it's a really well-weighted pass, and it makes Salah's job really easy. Puts it in the far corner, and I think it was nice for Nunez as well because, again, I'd say if he hadn't had a contribution in that and he hadn't scored in Leipzig, I think all that kind of robust defensive work that he has put himself about over last week, and that would have been overlooked. But now he's got a really important assist at a title rival. He's got a winning goal in the Champions League tie, and he's kind of got all the hard work to kind of sew those performances up. So I think we've just got to understand now, certainly over Slot, that Liverpool aren't going to be presenting Nunez with 9, 10, 11 chances a game. And, whether he has to get more clinical and score the 1 or 2 that maybe fall to him, I'm not sure if that will ever kind of materialise. I think he's just a player who will always be hot and cold in front of goal. But as I say, if he can nail the other stuff that's in his control in terms of pressing, setting Liverpool about the right way, link-up play, all those kind of good things, I think you're slowly but surely kind of silence some of those critics that maybe he's not having at Liverpool at the minute, but maybe kind of in the wider context of the Premier League.
Yeah, it's definitely an opportunity, I think, for him with Diogo Jota being out for the next few games. Some big opportunities, big games for him to come into and be involved in. It'll be interesting as a result to see whether or not he starts against Brighton tomorrow night. But we shall leave it there for this week. There'll obviously be all of the analysis and reporting as usual on Liverpool.com around that Brighton match and on the Blood Red channel as well. But thank you very much to everyone for watching along and for listening. Thank you to you, Keifer, as well, for joining me. We'll be back next week with the next Liverpool.com podcast.